Hello, everyone. I want to spend a few minutes talking about local and global scope in Python and how to deal with it with your scripts and your functions. So this is not too hard of a concept, but it's really demonstrated best in code. So there are two main scopes in Python. You can think of them as containers or buckets. There's the global scope, which represents the script level. And then there are local scopes, which represent individual code blocks defined by functions. This actually applies to classes as well, but right now we're not talking about classes. We're just talking about functions in an overall script file. So as you can see here, I have a variable called spam, and I've set it equal to ham. You can question whether or not spam is ham, but right now it's just a string ham. So in spam, we've set that value to ham, and if we print the value of ham to the screen, or spam to the screen, and just for the rest of this, I'm going to write global scope plus spam. It should output to the screen global scope and then the value of spam. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to run Python scope.py, and we see global scope is ham. So great. That's normally how you've seen variables work. So variables declared at a global scope can be accessed within a local scope. So right now at the script level, you see I have no indentation. We're in a main code block. Even if I have non-functional code blocks such as ifs, whiles, or fors, as long as it's at the global scope level, I can access these variables. I can read them and I can write them. Now let's say we also defined a function called dinner, and this is a local scope. Within a local scope, we can also read global variables. So, and just to make this clear, local scope spam, global scope spam. So I'm going to save this. So now when we run this program, it would help if we called the function. It's going to start off at line 1, declaring the variable spam equal to the string ham. And then it's going to define the function. It's not going to run it, just going to define it. So we define dinner. Python's going to keep that in memory. Then it's going to jump down to line 6, and it's going to print global scope, because that's where we're at right now, of spam, and then the value is spam. And then it's going to call the function dinner. So we're going to jump back up to line 3. It sees the definition of dinner, and then jumps down to the code block starting in line 4. Now, within line 4 and any other lines within this function block, we are in the local scope. So we're going to print local scope of spam, and then concatenate the value of spam. So it should read on the screen global scope on the first line, local scope on the second line. So we'll save this file, we'll run it, and there we go. So I can read the value of the variable spam, which is ham, at both the global scope and the local scope. Great, works how we want it. So let's say we want to change the variable spam. So spam is ham, right? And in the local scope, we're going to try and set spam equal to not ham, right? Both sides of the argument here. And then just to show something and demonstrate something, I'm going to duplicate line 7 and run it after dinner. So this is how this program is going to run now. In line 1, we're at the global scope. We're going to set spam equal to the string ham. Great. We're going to jump down to line 7. We're going to print the value of spam at the global scope. Then we're going to run the function dinner. Jump to line 3, go into this local scope where we change the value of spam to not ham. Now, I say the word change right now. It's actually not changing it, but it looks like it in the code. So just keep in the back of your mind, I'm going to revisit that right after this runs. Now we're going to print the local scope value of spam. And then we're going to jump out of this code block. This function's over. Then we're going to show spam again at the global scope. Now, how do you think this is going to look? Well, we already know line 7 is going to be the same. Global scope, spam, is going to be the value of spam we define in line 1. And then, we should expect that when we jump into dinner and we set spam equal to not ham, the local scope should say not ham here. What's line 9 going to say? Let's run it to find out. Right? So we see global scope, ham, local scope, not ham. But when we jump back out and run the global scope again, we see ham. So what's wrong here? Well, in Python, at a local scope, if you try to set a variable that's defined globally, it actually creates a new local variable that only stays alive for the lifetime of that code block. So by setting spam to not ham, we haven't changed the value of the globally scoped spam. We've actually just created another variable called spam that's only available locally to the local scope within the dinner function. And once this is over, this variable gets destroyed. So in line 9, when we access spam again, it's just accessing the globally scoped spam. So within a local scope, if you want to edit a global variable in Python, you must declare a variable using the global statement. So before we set spam equal to not ham, we declare global spam. So what are we doing here? What we are stating and telling Python is there's a global variable spam, and when we set a value to spam, we don't want you to create a new locally scoped variable spam. We want you to use the globally scoped spam. So now, when we save this file and we run this file, we see the global scope here of ham. Great, local scope, not ham. And now when we jump back to the global scope, we see not ham, because instead of editing and instantiating a new local variable and setting a value to it, we have set the value to the globally scoped spam variable. And that's about it. Just like in other languages, if you define spam only in the local scope, so let's delete all this. Let's say spam was only defined in the function dinner, and we tried to access it on line 7 here. So say we define dinner, we said spam equal to not ham. The first line that gets run that executes is 7, where it tries to reference spam, but spam's only defined within this local scope. If we save this and we run it, it's going to error out. Spam is not defined. So remember, if you only define it locally, it's not going to rise up to the global scope. And that's about it. Otherwise, the various variables behave the same way that you're used to. But I wanted to highlight global scope and how you can edit global variables within a local scope. Again, just use the global statement, and it allows you to access that variable both for read and write.